What's going on, everybody? I'm back with another video, and again I'm going to be using keyframe to make this video. And it's halftime of Liverpool versus Manchester United, and Liverpool just scored their first goal, so I wanted to make an analysis of this because it shows some really clear key points and some really interesting dynamics from Liverpool in their offensive phase, and a few mistakes that arose in Man United's defensive stage. So again, I'm just gonna, if you like the illustrations and the annotations of the video, I'm gonna post a link where you can get a free trial or purchase keyframe below. It's an affordable way to get quality content out to your team and players or other coaches, whatever you make content for. So let's get right into it. So first, we'll look at the Manchester United shape, and they lined up in a 4-2-3-1 on paper, and in the mid block and higher, it was a 4-4-1-1 or 4-2-3-1 or 4-4-2. Just depends on the variations and the movement and how they responded to Liverpool playing. So I'm going to highlight the keys for it right now. So we have Cavani, our center striker, with Van de Beek playing just behind him, Mason Greenwood, Scott McTominay, Paul Pogba, and Marcus Rashford in the midfield. And now this is when Manchester United started seeing mistakes. So I'm going to clear the illustrations, and now let's look at the Liverpool lineup. So they're in blue. So we have Fabinho on the ball. Fabinho on the ball with Thiago dropping between center backs. And then the right center back is off the picture just to the right. So this is when the first problem occurred, when Thiago, the holding midfielder, dropped between the lines using the concept of Salida Lavolpiana. And this started the problems because this was the start of throwing off Manchester United's defensive organization. So usually Van de Beek would be in the proximity of the holding midfielder, so he would either use his cover shadow or just man orientation to block the entry pass. But because Thiago drops as a third center back here, now the structure changes and the relative positions of the players and their influence changes quite a lot. And that's something that Manchester United did not pick up on here. So here we're just going to highlight Van de Beek. So we see his cover shadow is not in line with any significant space or player. So now the player that is able to become free is Wijnaldum, who uses the trigger of, so Wijnaldum's here, and he uses the trigger of Thiago, who I'm circling now. Thiago was the trigger for his movement to leave the right advanced half space and now become the lone pivot. So now what this does is it becomes a new pivot, and Manchester United structure was not flexible enough, or they didn't have mechanisms in place in this situation to deal with this, because we have our two holding midfielders, Pogba and McTominay, being occupied by one player, Milner, between the lines. So by this, both the holding midfielders are pinned, creating free space for Wijnaldum in the platform to pick up the ball and dictate play. And then now this would not be the job of the wide players. And this is why I struggled to say, I don't like saying formations very much, but a 4-2-3-1, because oftentimes the players for Manchester United weren't really, their main reference point wasn't each other as much as it was Liverpool's movement, and the wide attacking midfielders or wingers, their movement was oriented more towards the fullbacks and wide players of Liverpool. So that's why they didn't narrow and control the space, but the problem arose just from basically Liverpool's movement, Salida Lavolpiana, and then Wijnaldum dropping to take advantage of the space. So now, in the next picture, we'll see what happens. And then this is when first the lack of cover shadow into purposeful areas, and then it gets worse from here. So we see again Wijnaldum. He's dropped to receive the ball. He receives the ball on the half turn, and right away you can see his vision. The ball is traveling, and he is looking to progress the ball forward. So his hips are oriented, moving to receive the ball in the half turn. His vision is facing forward, so then his momentum, his first touch, can be proactive, and then he can break the Manchester United line, because without a fast action, these two players, Cavani and Van de Beek, might be able to recover, but with this, we'll see what happens. And then again, McTominay, Pogba are pinned by James Milner. So let's move on to the second picture, or the third picture. So now we can see clearly the build-up shape from Liverpool. 1, 2, 3, and then with Wijnaldum as the lone pivot in this situation. So easy enough to break the front two of Manchester United, who you can see even in this picture, they left a clear passing angle between the two of them for Wijnaldum to access. And then now becomes the dangerous part. So right away we have Wijnaldum on the ball. I'll highlight him here. And then we see right away his potential passing options between the lines. Just right away after the first progression, a positive touch, he has 3 positive passing options in the central 3 corridors, and these players are dropped between the lines, so between the midfield and defensive line. And this is a really good starting position for attackers, because now it asks the questions of the defenders, both the midfield line and the defensive line, on whose responsibility is these players. So, one, they can affect the back 4, these 3 players between the lines, and they can manipulate the midfield movement by their positioning just behind the midfield and in their blind spots. And then a key thing to point out is the wide structure between Robertson, Curtis Jones, Firmino in the wide area, because now the shape is a bit asymmetrical because of the overload. Firmino, his base position is forward. He's the center striker, but oftentimes plays as his false 9 role. So by him dropping to one side into the half space creates an overload, and now this releases movement and allows players to use fluidity to create space on one side, and we'll see how this plays out. So with this overload, they have more flexibility to drop or make runs in behind to work off each other while using these movements to affect the defensive positioning, which facilitates these positive concepts. And then it's worth a look to just take a look at Manchester United shape. So we have, again, pretty solid 4-4-2 here because of the breaking of the front 2 players. Now Man U's back line will become more narrow as the ball is progressed and moved forward. So now we have Pogba taking responsibility, stepping towards the ball for now. and then a slight stagger to still try and control the space between the lines of the three Liverpool players, who I will highlight here. So let's look in the next picture how this overload starts the movement that leads to the goal, coming from the lack of cover shadow used by Manchester United. So now we see Firmino again getting on the ball. So he came from the right half space. He drops in front of the midfield line, and then this sparks the movement, the narrow movement of the wingers. Curtis Jones narrow and Salah narrow. So this clearly frees up the wide area, which I will highlight here. Let me redo that for you. So first, the wide area is vacated, and this is on both sides, not just the one side, because of the narrowing movements of Salah and Curtis Jones. But the goal is scored directly from Salah, who I'm highlighting, and just a key about his positioning is he's on the inside of Luke Shaw, and you can see just his orientation. He's on the inside of Luke Shaw, so Luke Shaw can't have access to the passing lane, and Lindelof's momentum is taking him back, and just this little bit of space, it's a insane pass from Firmino to into Salah, but Salah's positioning creates just that little bit of space that's needed to score the goal and get him behind. And then this is on both sides, and again, the wide areas are freed by the movement, and their narrow movement was triggered by, again, Firmino dropping deeper. So now the wingers, that was their cue to make runs narrow, to narrow the back four, free the wide areas, and look for gaps in the back four to receive the pass directly. And then we see the last picture with Salah, his first touch into space, towards goal. Great first touch. And then the finish, he chips De Gea. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoy the second half of the game. I might come out with a few more conceptual pieces about this game because there's a lot of clear concepts at display here. So please like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.